This is a 42-year-old Concours rail diesel car, or RDC for short. This is the oldest N-scale locomotive that I have converted to DCC so far. Today, I'm throwing it into the most chaotic model railroad op session I've ever set up. Passenger trains, intermodal trains, and even an actual, not simulated, breakdown in a very bad spot. Before we get into this, let me explain a little bit of the lore of my layout, the supposed history, so that the operation of the RDC in this kind of makes sense. So, when the railroad that built the line through here first did it, it had a ton of money and it was very prosperous. It had money to blast straight through this massive ridge line, not even do a tunnel, just blast it away. And it connected the towns of East and West Valley. But when the state government came in to build the first state highway through here, they opted for a less difficult and less expensive route that was about 4 to 5 times as long to make the trip. With a dense concentration of industries and long commutes from the closest major town, the owner of the industrial park and the companies reached an agreement with the railroad to operate a private small commuter rail during working hours. The commuter train would not have priority, but could use the shortcut through the ridge. The industrial park purchased an old Southern RDC-2 to use for this and modified it to carry a total of 85 passengers with standing room, balancing the number of short trips needed with the amount of people it needed to carry. Okay, so that kind of justifies it and makes sense, but let's just go ahead and get right up into the op session. The RDC pulls up to its first stop at the East Valley Industrial Park. Now, you see this platform is a modification of the one that I designed in a previous episode, so I really got those down pat, plus you're going to see a more finished version of that previous platform here in a minute. But for now, the RDC is going to head out for its first run up to West Valley to pick up commuters. It does have to wait for the first intercity train of the day to pass by. This is a very busy line because of the cut through and the time saving. Once that train is passed, the RDC can head up the mountain. Back at the yard, we're starting to get some action. We have NS8345 and NS1642. They're going to be working the yard and doing the locals. We don't have a dedicated switcher today, so 8345 is going to handle West Valley and 1642 is going to handle East Valley. And they are prepping the pickups for the first freight that is coming in right now. Now the RDC can't dilly-dally at the West Valley station. It is on the main line, so it goes ahead and heads back down to the East Valley station and gets on that inner track of those double tracks so that an intermodal train that's coming down the mountain can pass it by. Now back at the yard, we've got all of the drop-offs organized, but we do have to wait for the RDC to pull back out and head back up to West Valley before we can pull that out because of the positioning. So the RDC is going to go ahead and head out. Now this is where I had a bit of an issue, and I mean by a bit of an issue, I was like, an oh crap moment, I'm going to have to restart filming on all of this. 8345 was pulling out using a bunch of cars as a handle, and then at some point it just stopped, and I have no idea why it stopped. It just stopped. It was very weird. It wasn't something that I've run trains long enough to where I can kind of tell what an issue is, I have no idea why it stopped. There was no weird smell of a motor burnout or anything like that. So I had to do some fiddling with it and pull it off and put it on my programming track and make sure it was still running. The motor still twitched when it was doing the programming stuff. So finally, I just popped the decoder off and popped it back on. It's a quick one from ESU, and it just started working again. I don't know if a connection just came loose or something. That's about the only thing I can think of, but yeah, it started working again. Who knows? Back to the operation session. At the yard, the freight is ready to depart for its next destination, but must wait for the intercity train to clear the main line. The intercity heads for the West Valley station, and the freight train can head out to its next destination. At the yard, the first local heads out and goes ahead and gets out on the main, but is going to be waiting for clear as the RDC needs to head back down to East Valley. Once the RDC departs, it heads for a brief storage and refuel at the yard. Now, as I said, this is a private commuter line running during working hours, but it's approaching midday right now, so the frequency of the RDC trips are going to temporarily lower during the midday because you don't have a lot of people going up and down the mountain and going to the two towns. This is the ideal time for the locals to do their switching on this very busy line. At the yard, the second local for East Valley heads out as well. The West Valley train is now arriving at West Valley and gets to work switching the two industries that are up there. However, we have another intermodal train coming through that the local switcher is going to have to get out of the way for. Now that same train passes by the East Valley local as it's arriving at the East Valley Industrial Park, but the double tracks mean that neither train needs to pause their work. The West Valley local finishes the switching and is ready to head back to the yard. Now the East Valley local is still working as the West Valley local passes by, so it's going to need to take that outside track around so that the East Valley train doesn't have to stop. As the West Valley train comes around on that outside line, it goes back over the double crossover and then reverses back into the inside line so that it can go into the yard. Now the West Valley train is actually just going to need to pull into yard track number 3 and just kind of sit there and wait because it is out of position to do some switching, and the long runaround that is included with the East Valley Industrial Park is currently being used by the East Valley train. It's also time for the RDC to depart from its midday rest, and then it has to go back out and start heading back up the mountain and taking people back home. By the time the West Valley train is getting parked, the East Valley train is finishing up its long shove back to the yard on that inside track with its 2 empty tank cars, and it's just going to park again while the RDC gets out of its spot. And the RDC just heads to its station and waits because we have another intercity train, but this one has a specific meet with the RDC so that they can do a transfer of passengers. Now traffic is calming down on this line for the day, so the RDC can begin doing its end of day commuter runs back to West Valley. The RDC parks, the crews go home, and they'll all go get a good rest and do it all again tomorrow. So, how did the 42-year-old Comcore RDC do on this run? Well, it did pretty good. It had some issues. There were a few little stoppage issues. I probably need to clean it a little bit better. And it is a little bit more herky-jerky because it doesn't have the flywheels or anything like that. So its movements are a little bit more jerky, and you may have noticed that it didn't have any headlights or anything like that. That's actually because I almost dropped it, and when I caught it, the shell fell off and then the wires ripped out. I haven't put the wires back in yet because I'm actually going to do a whole new project with it now, but that's why there weren't any headlights on in there. But so that was a bit of my issue. But it didn't have the worst day of my trains. It didn't have to have its shell taken off and have its decoder removed and put back in. So I think that's a win. I think it did all right. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and I may put out a YouTube short showing how I converted this because it was surprisingly easy to convert. So thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jimmy from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, and happy railroading.